Welcome back. We're talking with Marc Lemire. In 2003, 8 years ago, Richard Warman, an employee of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, filed a complaint at his office against Lemire for things that Lemire put on his website. As we just heard, that material was taken down, but here we are 8 years later, still fighting about it. I am now going to read one of the items that was complained about, that we have had an 8-year prosecution. How many days of hearings?
During the course of the hearing, there would be over 34 days.
34 days of hearings.
There was 2 appeals to the federal court during it.
How many lawyers on the other side? We had the Human Rights Commission. They had a couple lawyers.
The Human Rights Commission had a couple. Richard Warman's a lawyer. The Canadian Jewish Congress, B'nai B'rith Simon Wiesenfeld Center had a lawyer. The Attorney General of Canada had a lawyer. And
so there's about 7 or 8 lawyers on the prosecution side. And did you have a lawyer?
I had one. Yeah, I had a lawyer.
Of the few dozen cases that go before the Human Rights Commission, how many people who are prosecuted typically have lawyers?
By looking at all the cases since the beginning, it is less than 10%. You have ever had a lawyer.
You don't get legal aid if you're
You don't get legal aid. You don't get costs if you win either.
Now, one of the things you were prosecuted for was publishing. You didn't write it. You just allowed someone else to put it on your website. It's called the Canadian Immigrant Poem. Did you put that on, or did someone else put it on your website?
No, in that case, that's one that I put on.
All right, I'm going to read it on TV right now. You know why? Because I'm a free man, that's why. It's a long poem. I'm just going to read some of it. This is a poem that for 8 years has been the subject of a prosecution in a free country as hate speech. I'm going to read it right now. You know why? Because I'm a free man. I cross ocean, poor and broke, take bus, see employment folk. Nice man treat me good in there, say I need to see welfare. Welfare say you come no more, we send cash right to your door. Welfare checks, they make you wealthy, Medicare, keep you healthy, by and by, I got plenty of money, thanks to you, Canadian dummy. It goes on for 3 pages. I'll read a little bit more. We have hobby, it's called breeding, welfare pay for baby feeding, kids need dentist, wife need pills, we get free, we got no bills. I've read through the whole poem. There's no derogatory words in there, there's no swears, the N word isn't there, there's no disparaging words. It's just a poem in pidgin English making fun of our immigration system. You know what, it's too boring for me even to read. Now the thing is, I did not find this poem on your website because it is not there. I went to your website today to see what I could see. I printed this poem off from a government website, the Government of Canada's Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. If this is hate speech, if what I just read on national TV is hate speech, why can I find it on a government website of an organization that's supposed to prosecute hate speech? Can you answer me that?
Well, I mean, under the Canadian Human Rights Act, intent is no defense. So the mere fact that they're putting it up under this crazy law could make them liable under Section 13. I mean, if their real motivation is to really remove so-called hate speech like the one you just read, which they were fanatical about claiming was hate, to remove that, then they put it on their own websites. I mean, the thinking behind all of this is crazy. They're supposed to remove it in one hand, but they put it up on their own website.
Now, what other thing, I haven't read all of it. This poem, I mean, the Immigrant Poem it was called. I mean, a poem. I like reading poetry. I'm a dramatic actor sometimes. What other things on your website were called hateful by the government? Was there any racist material?
They basically at one point said everything on the website, even titles of postings, which one was immigrants get free limo service in Ottawa. That was the title of the post that they claimed was hate. And what it was House of Commons Hansard talking about immigrants getting free limo service.
Now, what was the name of the website that was prosecuted? Was this freedomsite.org?
Freedomsite.org.
Now, it's been a while since I've read the ruling. How many people visited freedomsite.org when this stuff was up there? How many people read these allegedly hateful words?
Well, what we did is we analyzed every one of the postings that they complained about, and in the particular posting that you just read, there was a couple of hundred, of which less than 10 were Canadians who read it.
So fewer than 10 people read that on your website, but I assume that thousands of people have read it on the government website. Look, let's talk about the legal case. You were prosecuted, the complaint was filed in 2003. You took this stuff down before the hearings even began?
Yes.
They began when we had more than 30 days of hearings. It's since been going on since 2003. So we're at 8 years now. You were the first person in history to be acquitted in 2009. Is that right?
Yes.
The government is appealing, or is it just the Human Rights Commission that's appealing?
Just the Human Rights Commission appealing. The federal attorney general, who was very active throughout the entire tribunal process of the case, had an internal review and decided to accept the ruling of the Canadian Human Rights Commission tribunal, and they are not going to be intervening at the federal court.
So the Conservative government, the Justice Minister Rob Nicholson, is not appealing this ruling that it's unconstitutional, but the Human Rights Commission is.
The Human Rights Commission is.
Do you think that's Rob Nicholson's way of, publicly saying I'm for free speech, but having his errand girl Jennifer Lynch of the Human Rights Commission appeal for him?
Well, I think that the Human Rights Commission wants to keep this law no matter what. They are fanatical about wanting to keep it, and they're willing to spend all the money that they can.
Well, look, it's been almost 2 years since you were. How long ago?
It's been
2 years, and there's no race riots in the streets. So if this law has been unconstitutional for 2 years, while the appeal goes on, do we really need a law of this sort if there's racial harmony in this country? Why are they doing it? Is it a personal thing? Do they hate you? Is it a political thing? Is it a empire-building bureaucratic thing? What is motivating these folks?
It's a couple of things. One, just to go back to your point about that there's no riots in the streets or anything without Section 13, the tribunal level of the Canadian Human Rights Commission has stopped all prosecutions under Section 13. So it is really totally in with no force and effect. Switching over to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, a majority of what they do using the Section 13 is there's a few cases that go to a tribunal, but a majority of what they do, and which is what they want to keep and are going to really push for, are doing things like working with police, exchanging information with police, censoring ISPs. The Canadian Human Rights Commission, using the Section 13, has went to literally every single ISP in Canada.
That stands for Internet Service Provider.
Internet Service Provider, right? Seeking easy ways to simply delete and remove content that they don't like.
The Human Rights Commission or the police?
The Human Rights Commission.
Have they been successful?
They've been somewhat successful, yes, because the Canadian Association of Internet Providers and others have sort of agreed to a method of being able to remove material before it goes to a tribunal. So that's really what they want. They want this hidden hand so that it doesn't go through a tribunal process where they can be exposed the way that they were in my case.
Is there any documents, is there any contracts or agreements that are publicly of this agreement?
Yep, sure. There's, I have posted them on my website. You can go there, and if you look up Internet Service Providers, and one of the documents is submissions from the Canadian Jewish Congress on it that I think you have put on your website before, which is where Bernie Farber says that the Internet needs to be tamed. That was a whole package of things that the Canadian Human Rights Commission was doing. When Bernie Farber went to the conference where he made those comments, this was a conference of Canadian Internet Service Providers, that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to strong-arm Internet Service Providers to shut down access to anybody they don't like, without a trial, without a finding of anything. Just simple forced deletion of content. That's what they want to do.
Folks, we're out of time, but I know this subject is what we're going to talk about for years to come, it looks like. If this appeal continues, it could go all the way to the Supreme Court. We've been talking to Marc Lemire, the first person acquitted of hate speech. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation.